The Information Communications Technology Agency is known by the acronym ICTA. And heading that organization in the role of both Managing Director and CEO is Mr. Muhunthan Canagey. And we have an opportunity to direct some questions to him. Why? Well, the subject of Google Loon and ICTA and lots of unhappiness between and outside has been alluded to repeatedly in recent times. So it behooves us to ask the man concerned to explain what it is that is happening. So 2003 was when ICTA, this agency, was set up. But your tenure began how long ago?
18 months ago, 2015.
So you haven't been there all that long. Now, perhaps we need to understand what is the ICTA, what is this agency meant to be doing in the context of, say, the present day?
So ICTA has a mandate of facilitating and enabling ICT across whole of government and as well as the private sector and the citizens of the country. It's about facilitating ICT across. So it covers a very wide mandate from digitizing, bringing efficiency within government, facilitating private sector to roll out digitization, the startup ecosystem, and anything within the ICT space comes under the ICTA, and we are not regulators, we are facilitators.
Interesting. The word facilitators is important to keep in mind. Now, I think the general public has been taken up by what at times might seem a fairy tale idea. On the one hand, accessibility of ICT amongst a large population and the use of what has now been called balloons or the Google Loon project. Now, much conversation has happened as a result of this idea, which of course happened during your tenure. I think we need to understand what is that project about.
So the Google Loon was actually brought about is mainly that we've had telecommunication operators in this country for the last 20 years.
Yes.
But have we connected Sri Lanka completely? Is there connectivity in the rural homes across, in very remote parts of Sri Lanka? Do they get access to internet at the speeds that we're expecting? And these are the questions that needed to be addressed for the age that we're living in today and the information age. Now, in order to facilitate this, we needed a project such as Google Loon to be brought in. That's a project that is geared to connect every rural part of a country which does not make commercial sense for a standard telecommunication operator to reach out to. Now, that is one of the reasons why we were very so enthusiastic about a technology like Loon, which will connect every part of Sri Lanka and just not within Sri Lanka, even 40 kilometers outside our shores. So even the fishing folks would be able to be having access to connectivity. So it has a very wide aspect of whole ideology of connectivity, and we don't want to bring about digital divide. So that's the whole reason why we went out. And when Google reached out to us through its representative, we decided this is the best way to go out there and let's facilitate the project so it would bring about connectivity and the people of this country would be connected.
For the sake of clarity, Google Loon, does it work or operate in other spaces outside of Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka was the first country to, if it implements it successfully, after its test, it would become the first country in the world to be fully connected. But however, tests have been carried out in New Zealand and now in other parts they're carrying out tests because we've delayed the project as well.
All right. So I understand that the word delayed, I think, is relevant here. Rather going to deal with why the delay, but before that, are we to understand that Google Loon was reaching out to work with ICTA Sri Lanka?
Google actually came, I'll give you a story behind as to how they came in. Mr. Chamat Palliapitiya, who is a Sri Lankan born, in Silicon Valley, and he's been with Facebook, and he's very well connected in the valley. He visited Sri Lanka and he met the Excellency President Maithripala Sirisena, and he said, what can I do for Sri Lanka? And then he said, there is a project like this which can connect entire country, and the president said, go ahead. And that's how it ended up with our agency. And then we took it from there and pushed forward on this whole things. He connected us with Google, and he facilitated the whole process for Google to come in. And that's how ICTA took forward this project.
Okay. Now, in the media, we've heard, and people outside of the media may not be able to communicate with you directly to find out, but we have understood from what is spoken or discussed that there is a frequency issue and spectrum, and there are these terms that have been used. I think we need to understand who are the people who issue the frequencies, first of all.
ICTA is not the issue of spectrum.
Okay.
The frequencies are not issued. It's by the Telecom Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka. That's a separate body which manages and issues spectrum. ICTA will make request for those spectrum for this specific project, but ICTA does not issue spectrum.
Okay. So what is the problem now with the delay which you alluded to a moment
so
ago?
we've taken this and we've made representations, and we've asked the TRCSL to make the spectrum available.
Okay.
And but however, there seems to be confusion as to that spectrum of 700 megahertz has not been allocated in the International Telecommunication Union for the purpose of high altitude balloons, which Google Loon is a high altitude balloon. And that's where there is a confusion. So the TRCSL is under the perception that this frequency cannot be allocated for Google Loon. However, there is discussions that are taking place between ITU, TRCSL, and also we've asked the Attorney General has also got involved to see what are the legal barriers should TRCSL issue the spectrum. As we are a member country to the international treaty, and we are for ITU, so we cannot violate international treaties. But we feel there is hope and there is a possibility, because if other countries can do it, then we should be able to do it.
So there is then what might be called a legal hump to get over. Is that correct?
I would say interpretation issue.
Okay. Now, we have also been told, and we've heard the name Rama. Who is Rama or RMA?
Yeah, so it's a wonderful, name sounds more South Asian, but the reality is Rama, ultimate beneficial owner is Social Capital, which is Chamat Paliyapitiya.
Okay.
And he's basically established the company. He's given us documents to that effect, and he has asked his representatives here to form the company and to be seated on the board.
Okay. So has Google selected to work with Rama? Or
yes, I mean the project was brought by Rama directly to us, and
right.
Google is very comfortable in working with that. And there is also a lot of software that needs to go in and facilitate this whole process. So this combination works very well. It was an ICTA who went out and selected. It was a proposal that came from there, and Google is very, very comfortable working with Chamat and his team.
Yeah, anyway, Google has an international reputation, so I guess one can understand and appreciate that they would want to have an airtight a program of dealing with these various countries and companies. Now, there is a matter which has often been brought up, and I'd like to bring it up now, and that's the factor of transparency. And it has been the view of some that this arrangement or transaction has not been transparent. So how does one respond to that?
You know, what's fascinating to me, Aro, is that you signed this agreement in front of 500 people. This is an MOU that we signed for what stipulates a working arrangement. And we need to do the test. It was done in front of 500 people.
Okay.
Once we do that, now we're in a process of conducting a test. Have we entered into a commercial agreement? No. Have we issued spectrum? No. Have we basically decided on a business model? No. These are all subsequent stages. Now, if you cannot facilitate tests in this country, and there are so many people who are trying to scream about that, then are we ready for innovation? Are we going to support innovation and creativity? I mean, you can't, I mean, if you want to be followers for the rest of our life, then let it be that. And this is what had happened to Sri Lanka all over. And we should never allow that to happen.
Okay. Now, from what we have just discussed up to now, no spectrum has been issued or selected. There is a factor to be considered, as you said. Is that right? An interpretation?
I wouldn't say selected. We have actually identified the spectrum,
okay.
but no spectrum has not been issued.
And there is no commercial agreement as at now with Rama and Google Loon.
That's right.
And you said there was no cash transaction?
No. Government never spent a single cent till to date.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to have heard that. And you also mentioned that the tests are going. So is this a test of a technical sort that is in progress?
Yeah. So when this project started, first of all, this is very new. It's new thinking.
Yeah.
Google is very, very positive about it. They spend billions of dollars into this project. However, when it comes into a public office, there are quite a number of people who think this might not work and things. So the best thing that we need to do is, under our environment and under our conditions in this country, is for us to ask them to do a test, and then the test report is made available to us. Once the test report is made available, we will put in an expert committee to evaluate the test report and make recommendations. These recommendations will then be studied by an interministerial committee appointed by the cabinet, and that committee will further decide how we should take it forward. And subsequently, policymakers and the cabinet of ministers can make a decision on what the basis should be. Now, we have not even got to that stage. We are right now trying to facilitate a test. And why shouldn't we do it?
Okay. So, would it be correct then to say that the public, by and large, have been either misinformed or under-informed as to the state of affairs with the project?
I would say is misinformed for certain political benefits of certain individuals.
Okay. So in the past 2 weeks, we've heard, in fact, on some channels, broadcast channels, certain things with regard to the matters that we have discussed, and so that's not factually correct then. The accusation is incorrect.
I would like to classify what you mean, channels. It's by one network,
okay.
Who have multiple channels, and the information is completely false. And today I think we're living in an era of fake news.
Alas, yes, we've heard much of that, not only in this country, mind you. So has that particular specific channel been issued with a spectrum recently? Has they...
I actually, that's something that I want actually people to ask them. Make disclosure of any spectrums that have been issued to them within, you know, and what have they paid for? These are the things that the anti-corruption bodies and the public should actually ask them. You know, this is something. This is an era of digitization, and if they obtain spectrum for doing things that are 60, 70-year-old technology of broadcast, and I think it is very unfair to sabotage innovation and make sure that it's not available for the people of this country.
So, as at the present time, since many people may not be aware, I'd like you to comment on it. This matter of frequencies or spectrum or whatever, and the price that might or might not have been paid is not known, it's not been discussed.
As long as I know, there's not been a public statement made to that effect. And I'm really not sure whether highest levels of office are even aware of this.
Okay. So we are really talking about digitization, and that some people have an agenda which is different from what ICTA is trying to do. That's basically what I'm glad to be able to understand it, because not all of us might get it quite right. So there is an ambition on the part of your opposing channel or whatever to try and hijack this operation, is that?
So let me put it to you. We're in an era of disruption. These are new technologies.
Okay.
And when you have new technologies today, even if you look at it in Colombo, majority of us hardly watch news and watch traditional TV.
Yeah.
We watch news on our mobile devices. We watch it through YouTube and many other networks.
You're right.
And we have a wide variety of information from which we can choose. We want information at a time that we want it, when we want it, where we want it, and how we want it. This is the new age. Now look at it. If this technology reaches to the rural masses,
Yeah.
and the rural people of this country, what would happen to these old companies? Those, the youth in those places would start using mobile phones, accessing internet on their devices, and having wide variety. This takes away traditional businesses, and that's where you have these businesses going out. Now, as an agency, we need to ensure that we look at the benefit of a larger population and not to the benefit of a handful of people. And that's what we are doing here.
So you have, just to reiterate the point, I'd like to get back to what was perhaps mentioned by you earlier. You have a memorandum of understanding and no more than that.
That's right. We have a memorandum of understanding which establishes the working relationship, and there is nowhere we have entered into a commercial agreement nor discussed about a commercial agreement in any of the memorandum of understanding. We just are facilitating the test.
Okay. Now, I think people would like to know the answer to this question, if you are able to answer it. How soon is it likely that this technology would have moved beyond the testing period to actual application?
We're in a country at the moment seated, I love innovation and I love to bring about new technology, and I think it's the right for our next generation of youth.
Yeah.
If spectrum is not issued, then you can do it. But sometimes in this country, when it's implemented elsewhere, there are people to say it's successful in another place, let's implement it here. So, might be if we don't get the spectrum on time, we lose out to be the first country in the world to be fully connected, and then let's look at another country as a case study, and then come and implement it and be late. And this has happened to us all the time, and we continue to do it. And this is where institutions, even within government, need to change. And even civil societies need to change and look at things more proactively, because we're in a world of innovation, and we need to make sure the next generation of kids are facilitated with this technology. So I would say either the two comes first. We issue the spectrum, we get things moving, and we move on, or wait till somebody else implements it, and then we follow through. So that's where it is. So what's the timeline? I don't know myself.
Okay. Finally, I seem to have the idea that even from the international regulatory organization, there has been some sort of response which is unclear and seems to have the idea that it's not their problem, but it's our problem, and so on and so forth. How might we clarify that?
The world is in a change. And even International Telecommunication Union is, for 150 years, and these are also some of the legacy organizations which need to change.
Oh, okay.
They're not saying that they're not for it. That's the good part of it. The subject is supposed to be taken up in 2019 on the agenda. But what we are saying is that we can't wait for 2019. We need to do it before that. Now, is there a provision for us to continue on this interim period where the Telecom Regulatory Commission can issue the spectrum? Is something that we're fighting for. So on one side, we're fighting for it, but we need to ensure the legal aspect. So we need to wait for ITE to come back. They have never said not to issue it. That's one thing very, very clear. But they have stated and strongly advised that public consultation be done and neighboring countries to be also to be consulted. That's what they have specified. Now, we need to understand what that means,
yes,
and we need to make sure that it is done. That's their recommendation. So it's up to the local policy makers, including ICTA, TRCSL, and to look at this further along with the Attorney General, and then let the Cabinet of Ministers make a decision on this.
Thanks. I'm very pleased that we had an opportunity to make this inquiry, and you had an opportunity to respond to some of these questions, which in the minds and hearts of some people is obscure. And on the other side, there is also some anger that there's possible problems or corruption, but I'm glad that you were able to clarify these things. Thank you, Muhunthan.
Thank you very much.